Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the OSS Helix Ti 556/223 suppressor. Not long ago, previous to this video, I did a video on OSS Helix suppressor. This is the Ti version and also the new generation for the Helix line, and the fact that it has an integral flash hider, which I think is a great addition to any suppressor because, contrary to popular belief, yes, suppressors do have muzzle flash, and if you put a suppressor on a short-barreled rifle and you shoot pretty much any ammunition, just basically depending on the relationship, the quality of the suppressor itself to the rifle, you are going to have maybe substantially more muzzle flash. So adding a integral piece such as a flash hider just makes a whole lot of sense, and to some shooters' ears it can change the tone, make the tone a little bit more flavorful or less flavorful depending on what you're looking for. So just right off the bat, looking at the new generation of Helix cans, I was intrigued with the flash hider. I wanted to see if it performed better over my previous experience with the OSS Helix. If you look in the video channel, you can find a review I did on the original Helix design on 556. This is the same can, but with the new integral flash hider, and this is the titanium version. Titanium is something suppressor companies look for when they want to reduce weight. But generally, when you introduce titanium, you sometimes lose some of the features that you were able to do, or some of the accolades you're able to gain when using stainless steel. One thing OSS did that not everybody does when adopting titanium for weight saving purposes is they still kept with the stainless steel core. So I still got 17.4 stainless steel in here in the baffles, even though technically OSS by their helical design does not have an actual baffle. But the internal core, the expansion chambers, if you will, a series of tubes in order to allow the rapid expansion of gases to cool before exiting the suppressor to reduce the muzzle report. Those are made out of stainless steel, so I'm still able to, well, use a suppressor for more excitable purposes, and I don't have to reduce my rate of fire or use the suppressor for special purposes only versus just general rifle use. Just because it's titanium, because sometimes, and I've seen this with other suppressors, titanium, when you run the gun really, really hard, you start to notice it very quickly with baffle erosion, and that's not something that I should have going into the 2,000 round review process of the titanium version of the new Helix suppressor. If you're not familiar with how my review process works, I do a 2,000 round review. Generally on almost anything firearms related. I'm going to put 2,000 rounds underneath it to get a really good sample size, a longer look at whatever the product happens to be. It'd be very easy for me to knock out reviews after 2 or 3 mags, but I don't consider that to be enough time spent with whatever it happens to be to get a really good feel for it and see if there's any quirks or issues, design failures, or to really develop a very informed opinion. So 2,000 rounds is what it is. Very first thing I'm going to do with almost anything is a 500 round burn down. And what I'm going to do is shoot 500 rounds as quickly as possible to see if that accelerated fire would show me any issues that I wouldn't notice shooting the same 500 rounds over a much longer period of time. The fact this is a suppressor, the fact that OSS didn't say anything about it not being full auto rated, I wanted to see how it handled 500 rounds of accelerated fire. So here's your burn down. No issues whatsoever from first to last round. I didn't notice any change in the tone, any change in the performance. Suppressor performed like I would want it to. Because the internals are stainless steel and the body itself is titanium, I was curious to see if that would cause any issues with different metals heating at different rates. But I didn't notice anything. Of course, I'm not an engineer, and I don't have a whole bunch of engineering measuring equipment and cameras and thermals and all kinds of nonsense out there. to really get a highly scientific look at the suppressor and what's going on with it as it goes through changes as it heats up. But to the shooter's ear, to the accuracy, no issues whatsoever. The overall design of the suppressor is a departure from traditional suppressor design. Their internal helical design spins the gas as it exits the suppressor. The flow-through technology, if you will, which is a departure from traditional baffle design. In fact, the gas may expand out into chambers, but ultimately everything's going out the same hole behind the bullet. Which can lead to some issues that are very prevalent with most suppressors, such as first round pop, and 3 or 4 rounds of volume buildup, and you get one loud flash, or one bright flash, I should say. 3 or 4 rounds bright flash, 3 or 4 rounds bright flash, so on and so forth. And this is why I think integral flash hiders should have been part of suppressor design since like day one. It seems to be a more recent thing, and they're certainly not the first suppressor company to do it, but I kind of feel like making it a standard feature on their whole suppressor line is just kind of smart. And you know, it was said not too long ago that suppressor design can't really go any further without the discovery of new metals or new metallurgical processes. And I think this is kind of proof that the flow-through design is applicable. It can work, it does work, and from my experience, the flow-through design tends to work on more guns better than some of your traditional high pressure or low pressure traditional baffle design suppressors. So I can put this on any gun that I have that I've used the Helix system on specifically for the Ti, and I don't notice a drastic change in behavior in a negative way from any of those firearms, be they DI-ARs, short stroke piston, long stroke piston, what have you. The suppressor goes on and it just makes the suppressed shot. It doesn't change dramatically how I have to shoot the firearm, what kind of ammunition I can use, what gas settings I have to put it on. Those kind of issues that sometimes arise with adding a suppressor to a firearm. Putting a suppressor on a firearm should make the firearm behave differently. And I think suppressor companies need to appreciate that just as much as firearms companies need to appreciate, hey, we need to make sure that this thing can be suppressed. And suppressor companies need to be like, we need to make sure this will run guns. One problem that we sometimes run into with suppressors is every suppressor seems to have, for the most part, a proprietary muzzle device. And OSS is no different. They have their own proprietary flash hider and their own proprietary muzzle brake. I'm using the flash hiders because I like their flash hiders. And it's as simple as that. I put it on, I screw it on, I shoot it or I don't shoot it, and then I screw it off, and I don't have to worry about anything else. This is as close to direct thread as you're going to get with a muzzle device interface. And they're not the only ones to do it, but we're talking specifically about this suppressor. The muzzle devices come with it. Some suppressors out there are great, but the muzzle devices available for them are not so good. So if I'm going to shoot this rifle unsuppressed, is the muzzle device going to do muzzle device things, be it a flash hider or a muzzle brake? Or is it literally just something that they came up with last minute, being like, hey, that's good enough because people are going to run it with a suppressor anyway? Not the case. I've been very happy with OSS muzzle devices, period, and this is no different. It's a very simplistic interface. It screws on, it screws off. There's really not a lot of guesswork to that. It also, I think this is partly due to the actual design, the flow-through technology, the way the suppressor works. Carbon lock has never really been an issue. I've gotten it pretty tight a couple times when I ran the gun really hard and let it cool down, but I was still able to get it off just using hand pressure. I didn't have to grab a strap wrench or shoot it off the gun, which you can't really do because it's threaded. Not a big issue. I don't have a collar system to mess with, a ratcheting system to mess with. Not that there's anything wrong with those, because quick detach has its place. But I love the simplicity of thread on, thread off. So I've always been a big fan of their mounting system, and I'm glad they didn't try to reinvent the wheel with that, because they had something good, might as well stick with it. Accuracy is going to be the question, right? Can I take my suppressor off and the gun maintain the same point of aim, point of impact? Probably not. I think everybody out there curious about suppressors should probably know by now that when you take a suppressor off a firearm, it changes the harmonics and can change the accuracy, point of aim, point of impact. So the question is it going to make a noticeable difference, and is that difference going to be consistent? Me personally, any rifle that's going to get a suppressor is probably going to wear that suppressor pretty much full time. Generally, the only time I shoot unsuppressed is for video purposes, especially with SBRs. Usually the suppressor just stays on the gun, and if it happens to be on other guns, take it off, put it on that gun, bring it back, put it back on this gun. But I want to make sure that I have a return to zero if I do have to remove the suppressor, say for review purposes or for something specific that I'm doing with that rifle that doesn't require a suppressor. So what I wanted to do is 5-round groups. I did this on my Roscoe 16-inch purebred barrel, 416R stainless, most accurate AR I own. Shot 5-round groups. first thing I did was zero the gun, which fine-tune adjustments coming from the suppressor it was previously zeroed on. Zeroed the gun for the OSS Ti, fired a 5-round group. Then I removed the suppressor and fired another 5-round group. Then I put the suppressor back on and fired another 5-round group. So as you can see, yes, there is a zero shift, but I think everybody's aware of that. Is the zero shift minimal? Yeah, and it's repeatable. So if you wanted to dope for that, technically you could. The big thing here is return to zero. I took the suppressor off, I put the suppressor back on, I saw a return to zero as far as accuracy is concerned at that purpose of shooting 100 yards on the 77 grain TMK round from Atlanta Arms. Very happy with that performance. So as far as accuracy, the accuracy relationship between the rifle and the suppressor, pretty impressed. Now I used the suppressor on a number of different guns during the review process, and it didn't create any issues on any of those guns. It ran as it was supposed to. It wasn't finicky. It didn't cause the rifles to do strange things just because they were being suppressed. And that's a DI AR, a long stroke piston AR, a short stroke piston Bren 2, and then a traditional DI Roscoe rifle. To bring me up that 2,000 round review. What is my final verdict on it? I think it's a great suppressor, and it is a noticeable improvement over the previous OSS design. Yeah, it's just throwing on the flash hider, but the flash hider is integral. This particular one, you get a lot of weight savings because of the titanium, and I think it was smart that they stayed with that 17.4 stainless on the inside to help prolong the rifle's service life, especially if you're going to shoot it on an AR pistol or an SBR. Those tend to be a little harder on suppressors in general. So is it a worthwhile suppressor? Absolutely. If you're looking for something that's going to save you some weight, but is also going to be able to handle a higher volume of fire, this is a great suppressor. If you haven't dipped your toe in the flow-through technology area of suppressors, OSS is the clear choice as far as the suppressor goes. That doesn't mean it's the greatest suppressor ever, because I think that's a very subjective statement, and we'd have to ask greatest suppressor ever for what, because there's more than just suppressing. Some suppressors suppress really well, but they're not great for accuracy purposes. But there's a lot of suppressor choices out there. I think for the price and for the features, the muzzle devices are an important factor, but also the overall suppressor design and longevity. I've got probably close to 10,000 rounds on my first OSS, which is the previous generation of the Helix, and I expect to get that much or more out of this suppressor, and I don't have any worries about shooting it differently just because it's a titanium suppressor, which is a concern I have with some titanium suppressors. I can't shoot them as hot or as hard, and I don't feel like I'm going to have that issue. So far over this 2,000 round review process, I'm not going to have that issue. So if you're kind of on the fence about it, I say go ahead and grab one. I think it's definitely worth it, and if you're interested in getting away from traditional baffle design, this is the clear choice. I'm Aaron Count with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.